Hello, and welcome to Have Your Say here at Radnor Studio 21. I'm Anne Minicozzi, founder of the Community Breakfast of the Main Line Undoing Racism Day, here with our co-host Diana Robertson, who is the president of the NAACP Mainline branch. And our guest today is Dr. J Osirim, who is the provost and also professor of sociology here at Bryn College. So thank you very much for being our guest today, and welcome to Have Your Say.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mary. So, Mary, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be at Bryn College?
Well, I actually have been a sociologist, I will say, in many, many ways for most of my life. And I actually came to Bryn Mawr because when I had finished field work for my dissertation in Sub-Saharan Africa, I moved to the Philadelphia area and actually was looking for part-time work. So I contacted a number of liberal arts institutions in the area. And to be honest, I had already had teaching experience, teaching for 3 years at Simmons College in Boston, which is a women's institution there. So I actually was called up by the then chair, Judy Porter, and interviewed, and actually was hired first for a part-time replacement position. And then later, one of the colleagues who was senior in the department retired from a tenure-track position, and there was a national search, and I applied and actually got the position to begin as an assistant professor there a number of years later. So I've been at Bryn Mawr in a variety of positions, from being a member of the sociology department, which of course continues with respect to my life. But in addition, I've been involved with the Center for Ethnicities, Communities, and Social Policy, which is now our Social Science Center. I've been involved with our International Center, with the International Studies Program, with Africana Studies, and actually there are a number of others, but we could probably leave it there.
Okay, great.
Could you just mention a little bit about your dissertation research that you did in Sub-Saharan Africa? Where were you? And just a little bit about that. It's very interesting.
So my research in Sub-Saharan Africa for the dissertation actually began in urban southwestern Nigeria, both in Lagos and in Benin, where I interviewed those who had started very, very small businesses, generally at that time businesses that were under 50 employees, which today in many cases in Sub-Saharan Africa wouldn't be seen as that small, but most were actually really quite small. And I concentrated in two industries, both the baking and the carpentry furniture industries in the area. So primarily at that time the sample was a male sample. There were women, but there were not very many. But then I went back later at the end of the 80s and thought, where are the women? And of course the women historically have been engaged in market trade and in very small, what we consider micro enterprises. So I actually went back, did research among the women. How did they start these businesses? Why did they start them? With how much money? What did it mean with respect to their juggling of community, family responsibilities with businesses? And then after that work, was very, very curious about trying to find a comparative study. So I then went back and began to do research in urban Zimbabwe for about a decade, with the same general population of women, market traders, very, very small seamstresses, hairdressers, and crocheters that are very, very unique to that area, if you will, crocheters and knitters, very unique to Zimbabwe. To be honest, kind of a holdover from the training that women received under colonial rule. So very interesting comparisons in these two nations, and then began to look at the kinds of organizations that actually supported women in their micro-enterprises. And then actually wrote a book and many articles and all of those things.
Okay. Well, how does some of that, I'm just thinking, you know, as you're talking about the businesses, and how does that compare to the United States and women in business?
So interesting, because in these areas, if you will, of Sub-Saharan Africa and many other areas of the continent, Basically, after agriculture, this kind of what is typically called informal sector businesses, but I really don't like the term informal, precisely because these are businesses that have generally constituted the bulk of contributions, if you will, to income earning for women in the entire continent. And there are still many, many women that are in this area. So on the one hand, while the U.S. still has a so-called informal sector or microenterprises, you would not see, shall we say, the numbers of women engaged in those kind of activities here, as you certainly do still in Sub-Saharan Africa. And these are activities that have really kept families afloat for years. These are often activities where women cannot get loans from banks. Sometimes that works, but in many cases it does not. And so it often means maybe very, very small, informal types of lending opportunities that exist in those communities. Sometimes groups like Women's World Banking have been very, very important and have made the difference. And the Grameen Bank historically, again, started in Bangladesh, but has helped many, many women in the global south, including in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's also the case that we're really talking about populations that, while they often are unrecognized for the incredible labor and the incredible amounts of money, that in fact they are contributing to families and keeping families afloat. So on the one hand, you may have heard stories about people like Mama Benzes, which is a bit of a term I would put in quotes, in some areas of West Africa where these women are in fact probably maybe even amassing enough money that they are owning and driving Mercedes-Benzes, maybe running multiple businesses on the side. But that is not the typical situation for women. So again, there are more opportunities now, but I will tell you that this has been such an important source of income earning for families.
Do you think in the United States that we have microfinancing, or should we have more, that it would be useful?
I absolutely think it would be useful. We certainly do have some, and so these big institutions, in a way that I've kind of mentioned in some ways, do support this kind of work. Of course, we have the Small Business Administration, but again, one of the areas of blockage often for women, and I would also argue for populations of color in particular, who tend to be more lower income, is having the kind of capital to start. And so the startup can be very, very problematic. In these countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, often what we find is that families will pool resources in order to make that happen. So again, it may not be the bank supplying the capital, but by and large, families who are coming together. So we also know that those processes operate in the United States. So there's something that in Zimbabwe we refer to as rounds. In West Africa we refer to as isusus, and here we would call them more rotating credit schemes. So there are many populations in the U.S. who still use those kind of credit schemes, so that everyone is contributing money, they're saving into a general pool, but then at the end, usually of a week or of a month, some individual gets the bulk of those resources, and that really keeps businesses afloat. So you will find great similarities. They tend to probably operate a little bit more with some of the recent immigrant populations in the United States, but again, it's the same kind of vehicle we would see alive and well in many areas of Sub-Saharan Africa.
Interesting. Okay. So now in terms of so education, you're at Bryn Mawr College, Provost. So what do you see as the advantages of girls attending an all-girls school, as Bryn Mawr is?
I think there are many advantages for young women today, just as there were many advantages back in 1885 when we got started. So I would say, I think one of the principal advantages is the way in which women's institutions build self-confidence, build strength in women, enable women, if you will, to be empowered and to really use their voices. And you know, these are young women who are not in the classrooms or on the sports fields or in their organizations or in the dining halls competing with men. It does not mean, by the way, that we don't have men in classes, because we have a very close relationship with Haverford, and also a consortial relationship that includes Swarthmore and the University of Pennsylvania. So there are Haverford students in particular in our classes, some women and some men. But the difference is that in a women's institution, and Bryn Mawr, I would say in particular, women are at the helm of the institution. So you see women both as the administration for the most part. Our senior staff literally only has, at the moment, one man in it. Our faculty is predominantly women, and this is literally a figure of about 56% of the faculty. So I don't mean everyone's stuck in interim positions or adjuncts. I mean full professors, associate professors, assistant professors, who are women. And students see these role models every single day. And because we're a small women's liberal arts institution, there's a lot of opportunities for working very closely with faculty. So they see that. Our staff, if you will, is also very substantially women. So there are all these great examples, role models, opportunities for women, young women themselves, to lead organizations. We have the oldest self-government association in the country. We are very, very proud of it. Students are very proud of it. And I think it's been another critical source of amazing empowerment for our young women.
Now, is there is Bryn Mawr the only girls' institution in Pennsylvania?
No. And again, historically, of course, we had a lot more. So institutions like, if we think about like Rosemont, Chestnut Hill College, were historically as well women's institutions. Now, again, for various reasons, some of these, of course, have now gone co-ed. Bryn Mawr is part of what was the Seven Sisters colleges. Now, I will explain. We still kind of call ourselves the Seven College, the Seven Colleges, or the Seven Women's Colleges, although there have been some changes. Vassar is part of that, and Vassar is a co-ed institution. Radcliffe is no longer, shall we say, a kind of freestanding institution on its own. Radcliffe is now mainly an institute for advanced study and really very much a part of Harvard University. And so young women are now accepted there directly. But many of these institutions are actually located in New England. So we have Wellesley, we have Mount Holyoke, we have Smith, all, if you will, in Massachusetts. We have Barnard in New York. You have us, you have Vassar in New York. So we still get together, however, we really do, as a group of institutions that share a number of interests. And we come together at least once every single year across the constituencies of students, faculty, staff, administration, and actually kind of compare notes and have very interesting discussions. I should also say that there are, of course, institutions like the Mawr College of Art, which are women's institutions still, that, of course, are, you know, different from what we do in the liberal arts, but I think there's some very interesting synergies there as well.
Interesting. So are there any, as far as the academic studies, are there any particular majors or coursework that students gravitate towards if they want to come to Bryn Mawr?
Well, I think I would say that generally speaking, we are very strong in most fields, but I will say as a women's institution, and particularly at the beginning of the 21st century, we are very, very committed to strengthening women's representation in STEM fields, so in the sciences and technology and engineering and mathematics. Now, I have to be honest and say, Bryn Mawr is a liberal arts institution. We do not have a program in engineering. We don't have a school of engineering, so I do want to clarify that. But we have partner institutions that offer degrees in engineering, and our students have opportunities to attend those institutions, to take classes at those institutions. Penn is one of them, and actually we have a nice number of students right now who are very involved in a combined bachelor's, master's degree program, Bryn Mawr College and the University of Pennsylvania. But But we also have relationships in engineering with Caltech, with Columbia University, with the University of Rochester, and other partnerships. But I'm just pointing that one out because engineering is a field that we don't really offer. What we have introduced, and I'm really proud about this, is one of our members of the physics department, Professor Mei Chang, has offered a course, Design and Engineering for All. That course is open to any student. It doesn't matter what year you are in the college. You don't have to be a physics major or a math major. And it really introduces them to what the field of engineering is about. I mean, it is absolutely an introduction. So we figured that would help with respect to also stimulating students' interest in seeing whether or not they would like to pursue one of the, if you will, combined degree programs in engineering. About, if you will, 30% of our students graduate every year with degrees in one of these STEM fields. And this is 2.5 times the rate of sort of the national rate of graduation for women in STEM. So we're very proud of that. But that's not the only fields in which, you know, young women gravitate toward Bryn Mawr. Another one that I think has become increasingly important and of a great deal of interest for students is international studies. So for us, even though we've always offered a lot of international curriculum, we really didn't have a program until about a decade ago when we started a minor, and now we have a major in that field. And I think one of the things that's so distinctive about it for us as a minor, well, excuse me, as a major, is that in fact students actually have the opportunity to study ethics within the context of international affairs and international relations. And just imagining, like, in a way, what could be more important at the beginning of the 21st century. So having an understanding of global ethics and how the world functions and maybe how it can improve in its functioning, I think is a very, very major plus. And then I would just say that Bryn Mawr has had a very strong reputation, which I would argue it still has in some of the classically oriented fields. So classical and Near Eastern archaeology, where we have a strong relationship, if you will, particularly with archaeology in Greece in particular, but also in the Near East, and our classics department and a very strong history of art department. So in those cases, we actually also still offer graduate degrees. But
okay, great. That's very interesting.
I think it's good to have the focus on the global community with the international studies now. And I think young people who are looking to attend college are having more of an outlook of being part of a global community than ever before. So I guess by having that, you see it trending in that direction too as a college.
Absolutely. And to be honest, again, Bryn Mawr, I think, is quite unique, even among, if you will, liberal arts institutions, in that way before the past, shall we say, 15 to 20 years, we have always had international students and kind of a recognized population of international students. And here I mean like not just one or two in a class. Right now, 24% of our student body is in fact international. And while the bulk of those students actually come from China, it is also the case that they really are coming from another 40, 41 countries around the globe. So not only do the students have the opportunity to study in the international arena, but they also have the opportunity to interact in classrooms, in dorms, in dining halls, in organizations with students from so many countries around the globe every single day. And that has got to be such an asset. And I would say, in addition, students have the opportunity to study abroad. About 38 to 40% of our students take advantage of that and go for a semester to a wide range of programs. And at the same time, we have a very special program that we call the 360 program, which is a cluster of courses around a theme that faculty design, and many, although not all, but many of these absolutely involve travel, so that students actually have the chance to look at, to apply what they're learning in the classrooms, whether it's theory, empirical work, in some countries or in areas of the United States, including Philadelphia.
Okay. So what is your, I guess other than your international students, what is the population percentage of students of color in general?
Exactly. So at Bryn Mawr, the students of color are about 30% of the student body. And again, this is a statistic that is really increased, certainly since the period I've been there, and I've been there actually quite a long time, so over the last 30 plus years has really increased. I would also say that we have been making very, very special efforts to increase the diversity of our faculty, because it really matters. And so right now we are about 28% of our faculty population that are in fact faculty of color. And this is again faculty who self-identify just as students who self-identify in those ways. We still have a ways to go, because even with that statistic, where faculty are concentrated tends to be a bit more in the humanities and the social sciences, which is wonderful, but we definitely need to have more faculty of color in the natural sciences. And as I said to you, with this really push for trying to, if you will, have more women be able to enter STEM careers, going on to graduate studies in STEM, it is so important to have role models that are in the classroom with the students who actually resemble them in many different ways.
Absolutely. So how do the students of color, how do they think of their experience at Bryn Mawr?
Okay, so it may be hard for me to kind of generalize, of course, but I will say one of the really wonderful things about, I think, being an undergraduate student at Bryn Mawr is that not only are they here in this community, which is very diverse, and they have an opportunity to actually interact with folks from around the globe every single day, I think for our domestic students of color, they have a number of organizations which I would argue have been strengthened over the years because of their activity, because of their engagement. So whether it's the sisterhood that African American women in particular have been extremely committed to, Bacaso for our African and Caribbean students, Mujeres for our Latinx students, Asian American Students Association, etc. And what you'll find at Bryn Mawr is that even though we are small, students are incredibly engaged in a number of programs, bringing in guest speakers. We just had the end of Black History Month, so we were able to, again, have our Black History Month speaker, and again, the students do a fabulous job every year in organizing this. But on the other hand, I will also say students have been very, very concerned about, if you will, Bryn Mawr's history, and Bryn Mawr telling, shall we say, its full history. And so there have been a number of efforts, particularly over the last 2 years, to really be able to develop and to make visible that full history. And this takes place in lots of different ways. I would say that last year, the president first put a moratorium on the use of the name Thomas Hall that was named after M. Carey Thomas, the second president of the college, who, to be honest, on the one hand, was a major feminist leader for women's higher education. There's no doubt about that, in establishing Bryn Mawr in the beginning as both an undergraduate college and a graduate school that gave the PhD to women, the first women's institution to do that in the country. Great. But on the other hand, was very racist and anti-Semitic, and did many things to prohibit, if you will, students from those groups to be able to attend Bryn Mawr. So our students, our current students, very much in line with movements that have been occurring throughout the country, have in fact protested, have written, but have also participated in the processes of further uncovering our history. So last year, in kind of putting the moratorium, if you will, actually it's a little bit longer than a year ago, but the moratorium on the name Thomas, we have now officially renamed that building Old Library. There was a history working group last year in which we had students, faculty, staff, and administrators participating to actually do the research, to find out more about M. Carey Thomas and actually what happened, when, how, where, for what reasons. And so that work continues this year with a Telling Our Histories group led by one of our faculty members, actually a historian, Ignacio Gallup-Diaz, who's working with students, faculty, and administrators to actually uncover more of this history. And so if you actually entered Old Library anytime since, if you will, the last week or so, a week and a half, you would find at the main entrance when you go down the steps a huge plaque. And that plaque, if you will, tells a far fuller story of whom the college and M. Carey Thomas was.
Great. So, as we wind up, if you wanted to give a plug for Bryn Mawr College, what would you say to students, high school students, senior high school students, considering where they may want to attend, especially our girls? What would you say to them?
Say to them, first of all, I would strongly encourage them to come to Bryn Mawr, but before deciding about even applying, come and visit Bryn Mawr. We are an incredibly beautiful, vibrant campus. Students are very, very active, and in fact, I would really encourage you to come in this spring, or in particular if you can, or even now. It's a gorgeous day out today. But what's so important is that this is really a place where young women can absolutely express themselves fully, develop, if you will, very completely, both mentally, physically, holistically, and really can feel that they're in an institution that is so committed to their well-being and to really committed to their furtherance, if you will, for whatever great things they're going to do in life. And the institution is dedicated to helping you get there.
Great.
I want to say also, we talked a little bit about how members of the community can connect to Bryn Mawr College because there's poetry readings, lectures, films, concerts. So is there an email address that people could, or even the website in particular, that people could find out more?
I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested, and there are so many activities going on all the time, to really check out our website, www.brynmawr.edu, and you will find literally all kinds of information, whether it's our reading series, various speakers, arts programs, etc. And we absolutely welcome all the visitors, if you will, from the main line and beyond.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Your information has been very informed. And as we consider celebrating March as National Women's History Month, we thank you for being our guest today. And we want to consider the messages that we give to our young girls as to their development physically, educationally, spiritually, and all of that to make them an individual that will grow into the young ladies that we would want to see them be empowered to do the job, do the things that their heart desires. So considering this, all of these things, let's talk about how you can have your say. Thank you.